I know they will remember all I said to them, that they will be loving children to you, will do their duty faithfully, fight their bosom enemies bravely, and conquer themselves so beautifully that when I come back to them, I may be fonder and prouder than ever of my little women.
Oh. Hi, Dayelle.
Hi, Amanda.
Okay, we're obviously doing Little Women.
Yep.
This is the book that made us want to do this podcast.
Yeah. It's so funny. I feel like when we first started talking about the potential of doing this podcast, it came down to Little Women and Pride and Prejudice.
And we were so, I don't want to say guarded, because it wasn't guarded. We felt like we had to figure out what this podcast was going to be, get our feet underneath us. Then we felt prepared to do Little Women.
Yeah, I feel like I'm very protective of this book.
Yes, protective is probably the word I was looking for. We talk about all the other little books that like help shape our childhood, and Secret Garden was one of them for me.
Mm-hmm.
But Little Women is the book I've read probably more than any book in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Easily.
Yeah.
Like, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's just one of those books that stays with you. And like, it doesn't matter how many times you've read it, you want to read it again.
Yeah. And I have 5 sisters. So for me, this is so like near and dear to my heart, because there's such a beautiful chaos of having, and you have a sister and you have siblings. Mm-hmm. When you have like a crazy household growing up, there is just, it's like that old adage where I can talk crap about my siblings, but don't you dare.
Yeah.
And you get that so much in this book. And, before we jump into that, we are drinking, which we're doing this as our final Christmas episode, because this, isn't it weird? I mean, we're both like this. This is such a Christmas book to us.
Yeah.
It's not a Christmas book.
And kind of fun. Like, we kind of planned this so that it would be coming out on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Which is kind of perfect, because this book kind of takes place, or I should say a big part of the story falls on Christmas Eve.
And there's the beauty of the March family and the beauty of the sisters. And it just has that warm, cozy hug that Christmas does. Mm-hmm. But we're drinking a cranberry mule. And which is, fun fact about everyone here, if you ever see Dayelle in a bar, buy her anything with ginger beer. That's all she wants to drink is ginger beer.
True.
So this one's pretty easy. Just a classic mule, a little vodka, a little lime juice, some ginger beer, and some cranberry. But also, I just love the idea of like dried cranberries and dried oranges, like they decorate the tree with it.
Yeah.
I know, it just felt very classic and nostalgic, and
the perfect Little Women's cocktail.
I feel overwhelmed even starting talking about this, because we're going to talk about the book, of course, but I have the list of every adaptation, so we'll get into that later. But
yeah, it's
a long one.
It is a long one. And I think like right off the bat, our author is, she herself is kind of she's like the author of this book,
Louisa May Alcott.
Yeah, she really tapped into her own personal life to write this book.
Yeah, she didn't want to write it.
And it is just, I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, similar to Pride and Prejudice with Jane Austen, like, I feel like these women were so before their times when it came to the stories they were writing. And especially for Louisa, like, she kind of started her journey out by writing what we probably would consider like smut.
Yes.
And because that's what was selling. And like, it wasn't
just like Jo.
Yeah.
Writing these sensational stories.
And I think that's just like such an incredible, it's like a nod to who she was as a person, that like she gets to a point where she's like, this is not what I want to be writing.
Yeah.
And obviously we'll dive into more of this, but someone also told her that she should be writing from what she knows. And I think that is exactly what you get in Little Women. And we can dive right into the fact that, like, I didn't know this fact, and I was, like, a little bit embarrassed.
Okay, I'm ready. I didn't either, so I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah, so Little Women is not the only book that is about these March sisters and the family. There are 3 other books.
That is like, you had this stack of books that you bought and you put it on the counter or on our desk. There's a whole nother universe where I was very content with Little Women just being Little Women. It just felt like it tied it up in a bow and we could just let it be what it was. I want to read the others, but I'm also so nervous.
I know. And you know what's also interesting? So Little Women was originally written, or I should say originally published in September of 1868. And the sequels of the book, they came out pretty quickly after the first book when you think about like how much work went into each of these books. So the first sequel was called Good Wives, and it came out in 1869. So only a year after Little Women was published.
Yeah.
And then the next one that came out was Little Men, and it came out in 1871. So again, not that far off from the original. And then the final book in this series was Jo's Boys, and that one came out in 1886. So that one was a little bit further away from the other ones. But I was like incredibly like I
cannot believe that I didn't know that. And I too, my favorite book, Little Women. But I mean, also so much I didn't know about any of this when it comes to her. So she did not want to write this book.
Nope.
Her publisher came to her and he was like, his name was Thomas Niles. He was the editor at Roberts Brothers Publishing, and he said he wanted her to write a book for girls. And she was like, not really, because I'm making bank right now, writing what they were calling at the time pulp fiction, which is funny because you were just saying how it's essentially smut. They gave a sample title of one of her stories, and it was called Pauline's Passion and Punishment. Honestly, I would read that. That sounds fire.
Too.
But she didn't want to do it, and he offered her father a publishing contract for her. His name was Bronson Alcott. He was a well-known thinker, and he was friends with Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, which, name drop.
Yeah.
But his writing never became very popular. No. And when it became clear that Bronson would have an opportunity to publish a new book if Louisa started her girl's story, she caved into the pressure. And I'll be very honest with you. This blows my mind. Okay. Little Women took 10 weeks to write. She started working on the book in May. She worked on it day and night. And she said that she became so consumed with it that she would forget to eat or sleep, and finished it on July 15th, like you just said, sent all 402 pages to her editor. And in September, 4 months after she started writing that, it was published. And she was already, like when it got published, she was already working on the next book.
Yeah.
And it became what made her very rich. So,
well, it's fascinating to learn that, because I think in the movie adaptation, especially the most recent one, it's so cool to see visually, like Jo, one of our main characters, obviously, of the story, she writes Little Women in the movie. And in the newest version, it kind of like, you can tell this happens over a short period of time, which is so true to the actual writing story. And I love that, because that is a perfect parallel to Louisa's actual life and her writing the book.
Yeah, and it was originally published in 2 parts. So the beginning part, first half was published in 1868 as Little Women, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, the story of their lives, a girl's book, which that's the longest title in the universe.
Yep.
And then that book ended when John Brooke proposes to Meg. And then in 1869, that's The Good Wives, which is the second half of the Little Women that we know today. So this first book and that second book is this book. Like, we're looking at books on our table, but just to explain to you guys. So the Little Women that we know and love, that whole version, that 400-page book, was split into 2 books. I knew none of this.
I didn't know that either.
How are we supposed to know that?
I don't know. And I feel like it's not really, you don't hear about the other books. And I don't know if that is just because they weren't as popular, or if I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning is behind. I feel a little bit silly that I didn't know about this coming into
It's insane.
my reread. I was like, stop it. Like, how did I not know about this my whole life?
I didn't know that Meg, Beth, and Amy are based on her sisters.
Yes.
Had no idea.
I did know that. I read, so in one of the editions, I have a slight obsession with buying different beautiful editions of books.
We both have that problem.
In one of them, there's like a whole little like author bio kind of thing, and they kind of dive in a little bit more to like Louisa's story and her kind of just life as a girl growing up in the world. And they talk about the fact that she pulls a lot of real stories and real things that happened to her in her life for her books.
That makes sense because Meg is based on her sister Anna, Louisa's sister Anna, who fell in love with her husband John Bridge Pratt while performing opposite him in a play. But the description of their wedding in the novel is based on Anna's actual wedding. And Beth was based on her sister Lizzie, who contracted scarlet fever in 1856 from taking care of a poor family, and she recovered just like Beth does.
Yeah.
And then she passed away from what they would quote unquote call a wasting disease.
Yeah.
Right before Beth turned 23. And Amy is based on May. She used an anagram of May for Amy, and who was an artist who lived in Europe and whose paintings were displayed in the Paris Salon. And Jo, of course, is Louisa May Alcott herself. Before we go further, I'm just going to say this, and you don't have to say who you are, but I am 100. I took the quiz. I've always thought of myself as a Jo, but I'm definitely a Jo. Who are you? You cannot tell me you're Beth.
I'm not.
Okay, thank God.
I'm an Amy.
You are an Amy, okay.
I am, and I
don't think of you as an Amy because Amy's spoiled and very materialistic. I think you're more of a lover and a taker-carer of people. You're like a Meg.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I
said otherwise.
When I took the quiz, I was an Amy, and I really thought I would get
Meg.
But I was like, either I'm going to get Beth or I'm going to get Meg, and I got Amy.
If you told me Beth, I would have been like, end the podcast.
I guess I could probably, like, I took that test when it first, like, one of the first ones that, like, this is years ago. I haven't taken it recently, so maybe if I take it now.
Like, when you take the Harry Potter test, what do you?
I get Gryffindor.
Okay.
But then if I take, like, if you go to, like, the Harry Potter worlds, then I'm a Hufflepuff.
Oh.
So like,
you're a Grifflepuff?
I guess.
Okay.
I don't understand. So yeah, I don't relate to Amy in that
you're
sense,
so
except
not selfish. Book Amy. Wait, hold on, because Book Amy has a really huge redemption arc at the end.
Yes, and I growing up, all I wanted was to get married and have a family, and I think that's the part that I related to, which is also part of Meg's story, but I don't know. The art thing was also something that I really loved, whereas Meg doesn't really have any hobbies that are really talked about or brought up.
She's happy to be a teacher and a mother. And,
and her focus is the getting married and having kids and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one.
So I will say this, though. Something I love, and I think, obviously, we haven't read all the literature from that time, but something that must have been very hard for her to do, but I love that she did, is Jo never ends up with Laurie. And we've talked about this in other books from this time. I love that. And Louisa May Alcott, the publishers and the editors were like, no, we need a love story here. And she said, there's plenty of love stories in this. I am not the focus, and I'm refusing to do it. And there's almost did you want them to end up together? So the first time you read it, if you can remember.
Okay, so book version, no.
Me either.
And I think because if you have read the book, you'll understand why. And I also think you see a very different side of them in the book than you do in the adaptations. And I think it's meant to make you feel like they want you to want them to be together. That is definitely part of the allure. But because of the the book's way of telling much more of each of the characters' stories. You don't get that from the book. It's just like a different take on their relationship. I think in my mind, and I think part of this is also because I grew up with two brothers and I had several friends that were boys. And it was one of those things like you didn't even think of.
It's not even in your universe.
It's like not even because your brothers are your brothers and your friends are your friends. There's no like, it doesn't matter that they're boys, right? And I think during that time specifically, you didn't have friends that were boys. Women mingled with men to marry them. And so any interactions with boys was as a prospective like husband
mating
mate,
partner,
right?
Yes.
And so I think that was a very foreign thing because Joe is so comfortable with Laurie, and you kind of assume that this is where it's going. And I think also, again, the book does it differently, but in the movies and the TV shows, you see a lot visually. You see that like Laurie has something for Joe, but Joe is not reciprocating that. I think it's like an interesting take on those two characters because, and maybe this is not for everybody, but until a certain point, I knew he would end up with a sister.
100%.
But I didn't know which one. I knew it wasn't going to be Joe.
In the very beginning, when they go to that first ball,
yeah,
and he's kind of, helping Meg out of the party because she's hurt her ankle in her high heel shoes.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is the start of their budding romance. And he's a little bit younger than her, but he's rich. And that's all that Meg wants is to marry rich and get these, lavish life. And I was like, oh, there's the ticket.
Yeah.
And I remember in the very beginning when I was first reading it, like, oh,
you can see that.
I can see that.
And that is a very standard love story where it's like, the boy meets girl in like kind of a odd situation and, they fall in love but that's not what happens.
That's not what happens. And have you read any of the theories? I was just looking at my phone because I haven't written down some theories of who Laurie is based on. I love these. So people have theorized that Laurie was based on everyone from Henry David Thoreau to Nathaniel Hawthorne's son, Julian. But in 1865, while in Europe, Alcott met a Polish musician named somebody whose name I'm going to mess up, Ladislas Wisniewski, whom Alcott nicknamed Laddie. The flirtation between Laddie and Alcott culminated in them spending 2 weeks together in Paris, all alone, and according to biographer Harriet Risen, Alcott later modeled Laurie after Laddie. And this one says that their affair was, crossed out of the section of her diary referring to the romance. So she crossed it all out and then wrote underneath it, which I kind of love this.
Yeah.
So they find Alcott's diary, all of her romancy tryst stuff that happens with the laddie boy.
Yeah.
She crosses out and then writes underneath it in big letters underlined, couldn't be. So very similar to Joe, where she probably really wanted to love this person and then just realized, no, we're better off friends. And you know how Joe has that moment with Laurie when he's like done with college and he's telling her like, I have to, like, I've loved you since the moment I've let you. And she's like, I've tried to love you.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot do it.
Yeah.
I'm desperately sorry. But I do care for you. With all of my heart, you're my dearest friend.
And he'll take any version of her. He's like, it's okay. You don't have to love me. You can learn to love me. And she's like, I would not do that to you.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fair to you.
It seems like it's based on this little tryst she had.
Fair. It's funny, like, obviously we'll dive into it when we start talking about the movie adaptations because there's so many, and maybe we just need to do that. But it's one of the biggest things that I was a little bit frustrated with the adaptations from the book because and every one of them does it slightly different, but in the sense that it's a little bit more in the visual stuff. And I appreciated in the book that there wasn't any romance between them at any point. There was no kisses. There was nothing. And with the adaptations, there are.
Yes.
And I think, obviously, when you're reading something as opposed to when you're watching something, you need to show the audience the feelings. Whereas, like, when you're reading it, you're reading it. So it's much easier to kind of, like, put out there what is going on in their heads. Whereas on a screen, you need to, like, visually see that. And I think it was something that I was, like, kind of bummed about. And it happens a couple times with a couple different moments of, like, relationships where, and it makes sense because think about the time that this took place. You didn't do anything with a man that was not your husband, even if you were dating or courting or whatever.
Nothing. You couldn't even be in the same room as a man.
You have to wear gloves. You can't touch their skin. Like, so many rules. And so it makes sense that Louisa wouldn't put any kind of, like, unapproved interactions with said male cast.
And very similar to when we talked about Bridgerton, about how you were not allowed to be alone, like Daphne and Simon being alone without a chaperone. Are you kidding me?
Yes.
Oh my God, what a hussy.
But I think that also just adds to the tension of the story because you then are like, you're wanting more. You're wanting more. You want to hear more.
100%.
You want to see more. And so with that being said.
Are you ready for this list?
I'm wondering if I have the same list.
Okay, I'm gonna rattle some off.
Okay.
It starts with the feature film in 1917.
Okay.
With Ruby Miller as Jo.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Which they apparently this movie is lost. Like there is no.
We cannot find it. Yes, this is the first ever adaptation.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we've got the feature film in 1918 that was shot in and around Alcott's home in Concord, Massachusetts, which that home is still standing today. And you can go tour it.
Yeah.
And you can see where May used to draw on the walls. And you can see the little desk that Branson had built for Jo to write on. That's so cute. Okay, but this one has Ralph Waldo Emerson. His house is in there as well.
Okay.
And it's a silent film with Dorothy Bernard as Jo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Am I missing any on your list here?
Wait, what was the last one you just said?
We've got the 1917 film, the 1918 film.
Yep.
Now we're going to 1933.
Yes, I have that.
You must remember you're almost a young lady.
No, I'm not. And if turning out my hair makes me so, I'll wear it down until I'm 100.
Jo.
And this is the first Little Women talkie.
Yes.
That's so
I
cute.
saw that. Yep.
Okay, and this is Katharine Hepburn and directed by George Cukor.
Ooh, so I have like a fun fact with this one.
Please tell me.
So apparently one of Jo's dresses for this movie, Katharine Hepburn had the costume designer copy a dress she wore that was worn by her grandmother in a tin type photo.
Oh, the old school.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's such a cool
That's such
thing.
a great idea.
And
Yeah.
then another really cool thing, I mean, kind of crazy, is that the actress Joan Bennett, who plays the 12-year-old Amy, she was 23 when she played her, and she was pregnant.
Oh my God!
And
playing a 12-year-old.
Yeah, when she got the role, accepted the role, found out she was pregnant, and obviously.
And at 23, that's baby making age. That's
And she hid it from the producers.
The whole time?
The whole time.
Good for her.
Can you imagine?
That's bananas.
I thought that was wild. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So next one, we've got another feature film in 1949.
Yep.
This was in Technicolor. This is when Technicolor was invented. So this was crazy popular and it was like star-packed. So you've got June Allison, who's playing Jo March.
Uh-huh.
Rodrigo, save me. Oh. And faint.
And then you've got Janet Leigh. Mm-hmm. She was the woman taking the shower in the movie Psycho.
Yes.
Okay, she was Meg. Margaret O'Brien, she was a child actor, and she starred alongside Judy Garland in Meet Me in St. Louis. She played Beth. And then our girl, Elizabeth Taylor, she was Amy, which is like massive.
It's crazy. A fun fact about that, she wore a blonde wig
Yes.
in the movie, which I was like, I didn't even realize. I think I just assumed her hair was dyed.
because Elizabeth Taylor's got black hair.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
her signature black hair.
Yes.
And then another fun fact. I'm just full of fun facts today. I just found these really funny. Beth carries around a basket. The basket was from The Wizard of Oz.
I did know that one. Yes,
basket.
I saw that same one.
So
That's
cool.
the coolest one. Do you have another fun fact for this one?
I do.
Okay.
Actually, the other thing was June Allison, the one that played Jo. She was 31, and she was also pregnant.
What
while
is happening?
Filming.
So if you can't have a baby, just get cast in
Also,
Little Women at the age of 31 to play a 15-year-old.
15!
Okay, that's insane.
That's wild. And the other thing that they kind of pointed out in this little tidbit is that Mary Astor, who played Marmee, June was only 11 years younger than the actress that played Marmee.
So essentially her mom had her when she was 11.
Yeah.
And she was pregnant at 15. This is all adding up. Okay, and then probably our favorite, 1994.
Yeah.
We've got, come on. We've got Winona Ryder as Jo March, Kirsten Dunst as Amy, Samantha Mathis as older Amy, Trini Alvarado as Meg, Claire Danes as Beth, and Susan Sarandon as Marmee. And then Christian Bale is our Laurie.
You aren't serious about music.
My compositions are like your paintings, mediocre copies of another man's genius.
And Gabriel Byrne was Professor Bear.
Yeah.
And this has gotten, it's
the one that I grew up watching.
Same.
I also didn't know this at the time, but this was a female-directed movie.
No way.
Which I was kind of like, whoa, it makes sense. I get it. I feel the vibe.
It's definitely it captures all of the girlhood that Little Women does.
Yeah, so Gillian Armstrong was the director of this movie. And I was like, that's a really cool thing. Because I don't think, 1994, that seems pretty early in the world of
100%.
directing for a
100%
a woman to take on such a big production.
Well,
I thought, actually, some fun facts about that movie. The role of Amy, guess who had auditioned for that role?
I think I know one person, but there's a bunch, right?
Yeah, I only have 3.
Okay, you tell me.
So Natalie Portman.
Okay, that was the one I knew.
Christina Ricci. Oh my God. I didn't, which is like a wild one because I can't see that, but
I kind of can because you've seen Now and Then, and she kind of plays that badass, girly tomboy character.
Fair. And then the last was Thora Birch.
What happened to Thora Birch?
I don't know.
Oh, and because I think I'm looking at the same list you are.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia Silverstone auditioned for Beth.
Yeah, I don't have that on here, but I did read that. I find that really fascinating.
And now, this is, I'm going to say this is not my favorite one, but only because the 1994 one holds such a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love, adore, cherish the 2019 version by Greta Gerwig.
Yes.
It was cast so well, I thought. You've got Meryl Streep plays Aunt March. That's probably my favorite casting.
She's incredible. She's incredible in anything that she does. But
And then we've got Saoirse Ronan is Jo.
Mm-hmm.
Our girl Emma Watson's Meg.
Mm-hmm.
Florence Pugh is Amy.
Mm-hmm.
And Eliza Scanlon plays Beth. Plus Timothy Shalamala Bing Bong.
I can't love anyone else, Joe. I only love you.
Teddy, it would be a disaster if we married.
It wouldn't be a disaster.
Okay? We'd be miserable.
Joe, I'd be a perfect saint.
I can't.
He is our Laurie.
I love
And Laura Dern is Marmee, right?
Yeah.
And when we were doing this, we both did the reread. We listened on Audible to the graphic version where Laura Dern is the narrator, and it's really, really good.
It's incredible.
It's really good.
Wait, but we have to talk about one of my favorite characters. He's like a bonus character. The dad is Bob Odenkirk.
I know, and he's so precious.
It's just, I don't know what it is, but it was kind of like the sweetest little surprise to see him in that.
Because he doesn't get to do roles like that.
No, and he's just so kind.
He's so kind and jovial and jokes a little and just, I love it. When I watched that, I had just finished Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And it was like, you were just murdering someone with your bare hands. This is so beautiful.
I like this version better.
But, okay, we're going to talk more about that. But this is something I had not watched until last week.
Mm-hmm. Are we talking about the Masterpiece?
PBS Masterpiece 3-part series with Maya Hawke as Jo.
Yeah. And this came out before the 2019.
Dumbledore.
Yep.
Michael Gambon is
the
Laura's
uncle.
grandpa.
Yeah.
Is it his uncle or his grandpa? I thought it was his grandpa. Or was it great uncle? I just reread this book 3 days ago. Anyway, so we've got I
thought it was his uncle.
Okay, so we've got that version where you've got Maya Hawke. Again, she plays Jo. Yeah. Jonah Howard King, who's from The Little Mermaid. He plays Laurie.
I've loved you ever since I've known you, and I can't help it, even though I've tried.
Laurie, I don't want to have this conversation.
I know you don't.
Catherine Newton from Detective Pikachu plays Amy. Emily Watson from Chernobyl. And Angela Lansbury plays Aunt March.
It's his grandfather.
It's
the aunt.
Okay, great.
That's what it is. I got flip-floppy.
And we're back.
Yep, we're back.
But the best part about this is I think this might have been one of the last things both Michael Gambon and Angela Lansbury had done.
Yeah. I would.
Because they both, I'm sure they've done other little things.
Yeah.
But it's a 3-part series. If you didn't know this about Dayelle and I, we love all things PBS.
Oh, they're just so good.
Masterpiece Theater, just sign us up. There's a Japanese animated series in 1981. And then in 1987, another Japanese Little Women anime. And then you've got TV. So you've got the 1978 version. And then there's so many for TV.
Many.
Cheese and Rice. I will say that there's a musical version in 1958 that, people went bananas over.
Yeah.
You've got Florence Henderson from the Brady Bunch. She played Meg March.
Yeah.
And Margaret O'Brien, she came back to play her role as Beth. And the film, is kind of like a...
Yeah.
Kind of...
It didn't do so
hit the
well.
bricks.
Yeah.
Because they tried to make it 1 hour and they took the part of Beth dying out, which is such an important part.
It's so important.
It's so important. And then in 1958, a 6-episode presentation of Little Women was on the BBC. And then again in 1970, they did a 9-part Little Women TV series.
Yeah.
People hated it. 1912, it was a Broadway play. 1968, it was a ballet. 1998, it was an opera. And then it came back to Broadway in 2005.
Yeah.
With Sutton Foster starring as Jo and Maureen McGovern as Marmee.
I really love Sutton, and I love that she was in that because she's
in hot water right now, though.
Is she?
Have you not heard this?
No. Side conversation.
Oh my God. No, this is hot tea.
It is. Wait, I only know her from the show
Google
Bunheads.
this. Yes, let me just Google this before I start ruining marriages. But it has to do with Hugh Jackman. You have not seen this.
No. She's married with a baby.
They started an affair in 2022 on Music Man. He left his wife. You didn't know this?
Wait, I didn't even know she was in Music Man.
They fell in love during their stint together in Music Man, and he left his wife. This is hot tea, hot goss for the pod.
Well, I didn't know this.
Okay.
On that note...
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Wait, before we go any further, rewind.
I'm so nervous.
Back to the Greta Gerwig. I found
that's what I was going right back to.
I found this little tidbit.
Okay, I'm ready.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this would have totally changed the way I saw this character. Guess who was slotted to be Meg, but had turned it down because she was going to be in a different, very big movie?
Okay, who?
Emma Stone.
I wouldn't have liked that.
Same. I'm so glad
I wouldn't
you
have liked
said that. When I read that, I was like,
I would not have liked that. I would not have liked that
But
at
she
all.
couldn't do it because she was going to be in the Favorite, or whatever it's called.
Okay, well,
I'm
sucks
glad she
for
was
her
in that.
because this did way better, but I would not have liked that.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Because this is my view on Emma Watson as Meg.
I love her, period.
She is, to me, the embodiment of Belle. So the live action Beauty and the Beast was perfect. If I were to pick a March sister to be Belle, I would pick Meg. She reads a lot like Jo does. Like, I totally get that. But there is a softness to Meg.
100%.
And a softness to Emma Watson.
Yes.
There's also a very strong independent woman in there, but she's soft.
Yeah.
In like the way that Emma Watson acts.
Yeah.
As Meg.
Yeah.
She's so gentle and sweet. And Emma Stone, I would not have gotten that from. I'm not trying to talk trash on Emma Stone. I'm sure she's lovely.
No,
but she is not.
I agree.
I'd see her as a Jo more than anything.
I don't know. I think, obviously it's hard to see anyone after you've seen the characters that were cast, but it's hard to think of anyone playing those characters better than what they did.
Do you have a favorite? Let's do this. Favorite Laurie? We just talked about this a little bit off. Okay, so I'm just going to say my thing. Favorite Laurie for me, most book Laurie-like, is Timothy Chalamet.
Yes.
Because there is a childlike quality to Laurie in the books that Christian Bale's just so hot.
It just wasn't the same.
No, it felt like if there was motorcycles back then, Christian Bale would still have ridden up in one. But he was incredible as Laurie. Just a different version of Laurie.
Yeah. Yeah, he just hits differently. It's just not the same as...
He's super hot, so I get it.
You know what's fascinating? And again, it speaks to the incredible director that Greta is.
Yeah.
I think she does a really she does a really good job of casting people who perfectly encompass the character. And
Agreed.
He brought Laurie to screen. He brought the character that you're reading on the pages to life. And not that Christian Bale didn't, but it was completely different.
And Saoirse Ronan and Timothy Chalamet are very good friends in real life. And I think you can feel that. Like there's this...
Fair.
There's also something that I think when you're rereading the books, you kind of have to remember the time period.
Yes.
Is they're 15, 16 years old, still playing pretend and putting on plays and being silly because that is what you did.
Exactly.
And I think that he kept it, like we are looking at people we know are in their 20s, but I believe that silliness between all of them.
Absolutely.
In that scene where he is telling Jo that he loves her and they're on that hill and she's saying no, like they acted the shit out of that. It is so beautiful. And I feel the same way about Florence Pugh as Amy.
Oh. When
she is in that room painting and she's explaining to Laurie why she needs to marry because she will never have her own things. It is, and Greta Gerwig does this, right?
Yes.
Like she gives you these really beautiful moments of raw feminism where you are just so entranced by the actor playing that part. You are really believing this is happening to them, which is obviously the definition of great acting. But Florence Pugh in that moment where she's just telling Laurie why she's going to say yes to the engagement, even though she doesn't love, whatever his name is, Fred, whatever the heck his name is, because she knows that she can't do anything without a husband.
And if I had my own money, which I don't, that money would belong to my husband the moment we got married. And if we had children, they would be his, not mine. They would be his property. So don't sit there and tell me that marriage isn't an economic proposition, because it is.
You know, it's fascinating to me because I love the way Greta takes something that is of a completely different era.
Yeah.
And makes it modern without losing the integrity and the original. Like, Louisa's story is still told, that the characters are still true to the original characters, but
Agreed.
she makes them feel more of the time.
Yeah.
Like, which is insane to say because it's still taking place back in the time that it was supposed to be taking place, but it's in such a different, and it's like, I truly believe that like Louisa, if she was alive today to screenwrite the movie, she would have done exactly what Greta did.
I agree.
I will say there is an exception to this. The one thing that I wished hadn't happened, and I go back and forth with it because it's one of those things where it's very real. It feels very, this would happen, because you get kind of put into this corner of like, your life is not going the way you think it is. And so you kind of start falling back on what everyone kind of expects to be what your life is. And what I mean by this is the scene in the attic where Jo gives her kind of speech to Marmee. And she basically says, if Laurie was to ask me again, I would say yes. I would learn to love him. I would say yes. I really struggled with that because
in the book it's a bit different, right?
In the book it doesn't happen.
In the book she says,
say that.
She says to Marmee, I hoped he didn't ask me, but only because I'd be afraid I would say yes, because I would be too, basically I can't say no to him again.
Well, she in the book, she doesn't say anything about saying yes again.
No, she does. I just listened to it.
Well, she talks about the fact that she thought that he would end up with one of the sisters.
Yes.
And that she could never say yes knowing he would truly love one of his.
And she thought it was Beth, right?
Yeah.
For a long time because she thought the reason that Beth was like looking
so
at Laurie
sad and stuff. Yeah.
That's because she loved him. And like, what a selfless, beautiful sister.
But I think that's the only part that I was a little bit like, I didn't love that, mainly because Jo.
I forget the exact words, but like I literally just finished listening to it on the drive here.
Yeah.
But Marmee says like, you know, so they find out Amy and Laurie are engaged.
Yeah.
And she says, you probably remember this better than I do, but she's like, are you upset it wasn't you?
Yeah.
And she said, no, I had hoped he hadn't asked me because if he did, I would say yes. Not because I wanted to marry him, but because of, and I forget the exact words, but to your point, it's not how it's portrayed in every adaptation that's done.
Yeah, and I think very specifically those words are very heavy, right?
Super heavy.
And when she's very specifically says in the movie, she like lays it out where she's like, if he asked me again, I would say yes. That part of it was like, no, you don't need to. Like, you can keep doing what you're doing, and like it's okay that he's not for you. Like don't force yourself into that. But then in the same breath, the fact that she's like so happy for like, and she also writes him the letter, which is another thing that doesn't happen in the book. But I think it's how probably Greta, because that was a very important part of the story, like that mailbox thing.
Sure.
I think that like that was just another way of like showing Jo truly accepting her decisions, where she like goes and gets the letter and rips it up and throws it into the water. It's a visual. It's a very visual thing.
Yeah. And in the book, or in the BBC TV 3-part series that came out in 2018, whatever the heck it was.
Yeah.
Because I just watched it last night or the night before. You know, you've got that moment where it's their wedding day and it's Laurie and Jo, and he says, I'll always love you.
Yeah.
And like, I just need you to know that I'll always love you. But now you and Amy have switched spots in my heart.
Yeah.
And she's the first thing in my heart. And it's like, I don't know. I have to be honest with you because there is those moments too where Amy's like, I've been second to Joe my entire life. I've been beneath Joe my entire life. I can't be beneath Joe with you.
Yeah.
And you get you get that so much more in the screen adaptations than you do in the book. But bro, there's no way I'm marrying. Like, I get it. Lori was meant to be part of that family. But as a sister, you know he's always going to love, a part of him's always going to love Joe. I do not think I could suspend that feeling.
Fair. And I think when you watch the screen adaptations, you don't truly get the relationship development that you get in the book. Like, Lori spends months writing Amy letters and Amy back and forth writing each other letters. And then they
travel together, just the two of them.
Exactly. And so you get like a teeny tiny little bit of that when he like goes to see her when she's at the aunt's. They run into each other, that little blip. And then he sees her again when Beth passes away. But like, you don't really see, it's kind of one of those like quick, like, really? Like, okay, 1 minute you're in love with Joe, the next you're going to marry Mary.
Yes.
Like, I mean, Mary. You're going to marry Amy. But I think like, in the book, you get so much more of their
It makes more sense.
Love story.
Yeah, I still would. I'm sorry. I still don't.
I know it is.
Of the time, sure.
Exactly.
Yes.
I was going to say.
But there's no universe where I'm marrying the man that I know has loved my sister our entire lives.
Who is it? I don't know if it's in the book or in a screen adaptation, but at some point there's a line where either Marmee says it or the grandpa says it or the aunt says it where they're basically like, we knew it would be one of the sisters.
The grandpa in the book. So he basically, because Joe goes to the grandpa and he's like, hey, listen.
Yeah.
He just proposed to me.
Yeah.
I had to say no. I'm really sorry because he said that you were counting on it.
Yeah.
But like, I can't love him and he deserves more. And the grandpa's like, what can you do? But it's probably going to be one of you sisters. So
yeah.
Oh, we'll see. And then it ends up being Amy.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's a tough one. I think,
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And this is what happens, This is very of the times. I'm going to tell you a fun fact about my family. My stepfather's father was married to my stepfather's mother's sister first. So she passed away super young. So the right thing to do
was to marry
him to take care of your nieces and nephews.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very different times, call for different things. I'm happy that he got to be part of the family forever. Because if you think about this, let's get our girl Louisa's back here.
Yeah.
If he married another woman, there's no universe where his friendship with the March family continues the way that it is.
No, not at all.
She's going to be like, you kidding me with this?
Yeah.
No. So I feel like, there's only one way that Lori gets to stay in the family forever.
Fair. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. I also love the relationship. I think you get a little bit in the book. I mean, you get quite a bit in the book, but you get so much more emotion behind the relationship between Beth and the grandfather. Like when the grandfather is walking on the road and Joe is coming back from throwing her letter down the water, and it's right after, obviously, Beth had passed, and he said, I would go inside, but it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it would be the same, or I don't know the exact line.
He loved her.
It is such a beautiful. And also, incredibly devastating because his daughter passed away young.
And that's her piano that he gifts.
Exactly.
Beth.
And it's just this, moment of just absolute, there's nothing
it's
that
just pure heartbreak.
Yeah. There's nothing anyone can do. It's just them sitting in that moment together of, absolute grief. But yet still, we still have to go about our lives, we have to process this and we have to, but I just loved that moment that I don't think it happens in the original, the one that I grew up with watching.
I don't remember a part like that.
I don't remember that. The grandfather is much harsher in the original. You don't get as much of that sweetness. It's kind of like you don't really get a lot of the poor family that they like help at Christmas time in Greta's storyline.
Mm-hmm.
You only get like little bits, like, if you know the story, you know what's happening.
The BBC version, just because that's freshest in my brain.
Yeah.
They really do focus on it. They're also giving it so much more time. It's 3 hours long.
Okay.
But, they have Marmee comes home and says, I've just come from the most devastating thing.
Yeah.
And then it's Christmas morning, and then you have like Maya Hawke running through the streets with basically a tea tray, and nothing falls over, and she's just like running 16 miles.
Yeah.
But those scenes are really devastating. And then when the baby dies, they show it.
Yeah.
And she's holding the baby, and she's like, please wake up, please wake up. And she runs to the doctor, and the doctor's like, she's gone, and now I have to check you. You have scarlet fever.
Yeah. Well, and that's the visual. So I have the visual from the 1994 one when she, Beth walks up to the house and the mother is holding the baby and she's, speaking. I forget what was it.
They're German in the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so she's speaking to her and she like hands her the baby and you just see Beth just sobbing and like
awful.
You know what's happening because if you've read the book, you know what's going on. But in that moment, as like a viewer, you probably have no idea what's happening except that like whatever is happening, it's horrible. And then the next scene is when she's back in like the parlor or the living room. I don't know why I called it a parlor.
Because you're quite fancy.
And she's just kind of like laying on the piano or whatever she's laying on. I forget what she's laying on. And Joe walks in and is kind of like, what, do you not feel well? Whatever it is. And that's when, she's very sick and dying or what they assume she's dying. And the doctor's like, oh, I must bleed her. Cause bleeding is how they
get
cure
the leeches.
And Marmee comes home and is like, no, we don't need to bleed her. Like we need to get the towels, the blankets, all this stuff off of her. We need to cool her down. We need to get rid of her fever. But I feel like almost every adaptation does a really good job of the lapse of when Beth gets very sick and then comes out of it the first time round. And then the second time round, there's almost like in the newest edition, they kind of time lapse it. So like it feels like it's all kind of coming back. It's like flashbacks of the first time and the storyline and all that stuff. And then obviously when Joe goes down into the kitchen, the last time she went into the kitchen, Beth was sitting at the table. But then obviously this time she goes down and it's just her mom. Her mom's crying. And I thought that was very beautiful. And I thought it was very, you felt all the same emotions you feel and almost more than the first version of it because
I agree.
The first version felt very quick and you don't get the same it's like, she gets sick again and then she dies. And then that's it. Not that that's not what happens, but
no, yeah. In the TV version, that 3-part series, you get Beth laying in bed with her and like, Meg sitting there day and night with the kids and she says, are the kids tiring you? And like you get more of we're watching Beth die.
Yeah.
And again, you don't really get that in the 1994 version. And I wonder if it's because it was such a already done so many times.
Yeah.
Maybe they just felt like everybody knows Beth's going to die.
Also,
but
it's
I think
hard.
it's very hard, but I think it's important. And I really love the way that Greta Gerwig does that because it's an artistic view of like how this poor family, like that's their darling child.
Yeah.
And then I love to, in the book, you get those moments where, and I will say in the TV adaptation, you get it. In Greta's version, you get it. Not so much the 1994 version, but where Marmee's saying like she was the only kid I never made plans for.
Yeah.
She's my only daughter I never made plans for because I just always figured she would always be here because even before she got sick, remember she has like that anxiety. She can't go outside. She doesn't want to be around people. She's super quiet. So Marmee always thought that she would be there. That would be the one daughter to stay home and be with them.
Yeah. And I think too, in the book, you get more of her and Joe's relationship. Like in the movies, you don't necessarily see, you do to an extent, you see their closeness. There's a lot of moments where they're, having that like togetherness, closeness. But in the book, there's so much more of that. She pays for her to go to the ocean with her mom the first time. And then the next time she gets sick, she's like, let's go to the seaside. And they have it's a pretty long time that they're at the sea. And they have all these moments where like Jo is reading her stories because she loves Jo's stories. And she's very like honest with her about the fact that like, Jo, I don't like the stories that you're telling me. I want you to tell me my story or like your story, whatever it is. And that's such a beautiful moment because it really speaks to, I would assume also like Louisa, like that's a moment in her life where she makes this decision to dig deep into herself to pull this story out, which I'm sure was not easy.
I can't even imagine it. And not to compare it to something very pop culture-y, but in the Gilmore Girls reboot, right? And I was thinking about this just in the reread and rewatching it.
Yeah.
It ends with Rory writing the story of the Gilmore Girls about her mom and her grandma.
Yeah.
And I imagine like Louisa May Alcott's like, the Rory in the situation where she's revisiting her life and fictionalizing it in a way that I think it's easier to process.
Yeah.
But like, these are real hard stories. And to your point, she was doing that, right? She was writing these fictional, sensationalized stories to get money. Mm-hmm. And then in the book, she has this moment where she's not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this book was that moment for Louisa May Alcott to be like, okay, I can write literature.
Yeah.
People will pay me for this.
Yeah. And I would assume like it takes a lot of grit to put your
good Lord,
your life out there.
Talk about being naked.
Yeah.
It's like naked on a stage.
I don't know. It is, literally we could probably do like 10 episodes on this book because
it is, as a sister with, a billion siblings, no brothers, there is a bond that you have with a sister. If you have one sister, you know it. Mm-hmm. And I always feel, like, don't get me wrong, I want to kill my sisters half the time. Mm-hmm. But like there is a love that you share when you've gone through, when you don't have an easy time growing up, when you are poor growing up. And like, the Louisa May Alcott wrote these parents with the Marmee and the father. They are so ahead of their time.
Yeah.
They don't want their daughters to just get married and go out to the rich guy. They want their daughters to love and don't even have to marry.
Yeah.
And they don't care if their daughters have jobs. They just need to be busy and be giving back.
Right.
They don't care if they're getting paid. They don't care if they have high-paying jobs, but you need to be busy with yourself and you need to give back and be kind and be better people. And this book teaches you so many, you don't even realize that you're learning these lessons because of the way that they're portrayed, but you come out of this like, even listening to it, the graphic, audiobook is fantastic.
So good.
And you still get that vibe of, I was done listening to it and I listened to the last like 5 chapters on the drive down today because I just love how I feel when I'm listening to it. It's a very reminiscent. It wasn't escapism where a lot of these other books that we've talked about from our childhood is escapism. Mm-hmm. This was, I feel like I'm a better sister, a better daughter, a better person. You see all the flaws of all of these people. Like I love the way that Jo constantly says, I'm just so angry and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry I'm like this. And the mom says, that's me. You get it from me. I'm angry every single day of my life and I don't know what to do with it. But your father keeps me even-tempered. And just it shows you that you're allowed to be who you are.
Yeah.
At your core, it's not bad to be who you are, but you can always be a better version of yourself. Mm-hmm. Not to be very preachy, but that this book is that version for young girls.
100%.
And we didn't get a lot of that. We still don't have a lot of that for young girls.
And it's another book that just kind of stands the test of time. Obviously, a lot has changed.
Well, you think? You think?
But I like it. After reading it, I like feel like I'm like in such a like happy, like it's the perfect. It also, you don't have to read it at Christmas time or the holidays,
no.
right?
I just always have.
But it's just, there's something about it that just puts you into that like mindset.
Do you think too that there's a with every reread, I get something else from it. And for this one, for me, it was just how important the people that you care about are to you. Like Beth dying is sad, but Beth's not sad about dying.
No.
And I've never gotten that from a reread.
Yeah.
But this time I don't know, for whatever reason, it was Beth accepted her death and died silently, knowing she was dying for a full year. Before she tells her sisters, before she tells her mom, and then asks her sisters to tell her mom and dad. Like she knows that she's dying, and there's such a strength in Beth's character. We think of Beth as so frail.
Yeah.
And in this reread, I thought of she's so strong.
She's so strong.
She's probably the strongest of all of them.
Yeah. I mean, there's this scene where like Joe thinks that Beth is sad because she's in love with Laurie.
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, Joe, I look at you and you're so healthy and so strong and like you're going places and you're doing all this." And she's like, "I'll never be that person.
Able to do that. Yeah.
I'm dying. I'm not going to be able to go."
And she accepts it.
And 100%. But it's interesting too to see her see that in her life.
And recognize it.
And very much be like, I was angry. And then I realized like, that's just not my path. And it's like,
oh, but this is one of those books I can read it 5 million times and I get something different every single time.
And then like back to the sisterly love part, the fact that like there's the scene where, little Miss Amy.
I can't even. I would have killed her.
Throws Joe's book into the fire.
Have yeeted her off the 3rd-story window of Concord, Massachusetts home.
Can you imagine? And Joe is infuriated. She's so angry. And Marmee says, "Please don't be angry with your sister. She's so sorry. She did this out of, she was upset she couldn't go with you to the play. And she feels terrible. She wishes she could make it up." And Joe is like not having it. And then Laurie and Joe go ice skating. And Amy's like, "But Joe, you promised that I could come with you this time. You said I could." And, she follows them out. And of course she falls into the ice. And in that split second, Joe realizes like, I don't even remember why I was upset with you. Like, you're my sister.
And she also has that moment where she doesn't tell her sister, "Don't come to the center of the ice because it's thin." And Laurie told her.
Yes.
She doesn't tell her. So she's now blaming
she
herself.
Doesn't care. Right.
And now she blames herself. But that's that sisterly love, right? In 1 second, you could watch them fall through the ice. And the next, you would die yourself to get them out.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I love that. I think that's beautiful. And there's just so many things like that. I mean, even with like Joe's, actual love story. She does fall in love with herself first, because she kind of finds herself. But then she also meets this lovely older professor. And he's a wonderful man. He loves children and he's adventurous. He's not worth a penny. He has not a penny to his name.
And she does not care.
And she doesn't care. Yeah. And it's just it's a very sweet friendship. And from the very beginning, you hear like you know that she is falling for him, but it's like kind of like this like I don't want to admit it to myself thing. And then she has to go home because obviously Beth is very sick, and they kind of go their separate ways. And then they reconnect, and like he's like, "I've always loved you, and like I want to be with you, but I have nothing. My hands are empty." And it's the moment where she's like, "No, they're not." And like seriously, we can't, like there's so many things.
If you're the person who's like, "Oh God, this is one of those books that everyone tells you you've got to read." It is a little bit of a hard read because the language is a little dense, but listen.
Fair.
If you like to listen to audiobooks, listen to the graphic novel narrated by Laura Dern. It's fantastic. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's really pretty.
And I doubt there's any adaptation of this that I wouldn't enjoy something of.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think every version that was put out on screen stays true and goes a little bit off of the book.
I don't like the ones that have modernized it. I'll say that right now.
Fair.
There's like some TV movie version I saw. Every time I searched for it would pop up, and it's like maybe 90s, early 2000s. And I'm like, well.
So with that being said, I would recommend the 2019, obviously Greta.
Sure.
I would recommend the 1994. 94.
Yeah. Is it 94?
Yep, 94. And then the PBS 2018 for watches. And 100, well, I just dove into that question. I didn't even ask. But
no, 100%.
I would read it and then watch it.
Yeah. And if you've already watched it, which I think most people have watched that 2019 version, it's fantastic.
Read it.
Read it.
Listen to the audiobook.
Yeah, it's really lovely. And it's one of those things that you're not going to be sad you did it. And you're like, oh, I get it now.
It's entertaining. It's like watching a movie, except you're listening to it. It's like a movie in your ears.
This is definitely a both for me. This is
Same.
I don't think you can love it without reading it.
No.
So.
Fair.
All right. I'm so glad we did this one. I was so nervous.
I know. Because it's our, I don't know.
It's like our baby.
Yeah, it really is. We love it. And we hope that...
we hope that you loved it. And we hope that you had a great holiday season, because this is the last of our holiday episodes. So you're listening to this on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas. Or
Happy
Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Yule. Any of them. If
all
Krampus got you,
we
do talk about Krampus on our Folktown episode. So if Krampus got you, we hope you're listening to this wherever Krampus took you to.
Family is important.
So
just remember that.
Remember that.
On that,
bye. Our editor is Katie Yonner. Our associate producer is Grace Heerman. Our production coordinator is Nicole Vargas, and our senior content producer is Kyle Bosch. Our executive producer is Tommy West, and Watch It or Read It is produced by Gotham West Studios.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. And now I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun, Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from, with new games released each week. You can play for free, and each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.